Ethan Miller learned early how to live quietly inside his own thoughts. At 24, he worked remotely, kept his routines tidy, and told himself that stability mattered more than certainty. He shared a two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a narrow building with Lucas Reed, a roommate he'd found through a listing that promised easygoing, respectful, drama-free. At the time, that had sounded perfect. Most evenings followed the same rhythm. Ethan closed his laptop, reheated something simple, and checked his phone for a message from Maya Collins. She lived 2 cities away, close enough to make promises feel real and far enough to make them slippery. Their relationship existed mostly in glowing rectangles, good morning texts, voice notes sent during lunch breaks, a careful exchange of affection that never quite filled the silence between replies. Ethan told himself that distance explained everything. Lucas disrupted that calm in small, unassuming ways. He cooked without measuring, hummed while he cleaned, and treated the apartment like a shared space rather than a neutral zone. He was 26, openly gay, and possessed a relaxed confidence that didn't ask for permission. When Lucas laughed, it carried; when he listened, it felt deliberate. Ethan noticed these things without knowing what to do with the noticing. They weren't close in the way friends often were. They didn't pry or confess. They simply coexisted with an ease that felt earned. Lucas respected Ethan's quiet. Ethan respected Lucas's openness. Somewhere between borrowed charges and unspoken agreements about rent, a comfort settled in. On nights when Maya didn't respond for hours, Ethan found himself lingering in the kitchen longer than necessary, asking Lucas trivial questions about recipes or music. Lucas answered easily, never pressing, never teasing. It was a kindness Ethan accepted without examining too closely. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself he was just lonely. The apartment itself was modest but warm. Narrow hallway, creaky floors, windows that rattled when the wind picked up. That evening, clouds gathered early, pressing low against the sky. Ethan noticed them only because Lucas pointed them out from the balcony, leaning against the railing as if storms were familiar company. "Looks like we're in for it," Lucas said, watching the dark roll in. Ethan nodded, unsure why the comment lodged itself in his chest. He checked his phone again. No new message from Maya. He slipped it back into his pocket. They ate dinner separately but not apart, sitting at opposite ends of the small living room, the television murmuring low. Ethan tried to focus on the screen, but his attention kept drifting, to the way Lucas tucked one leg beneath himself, to the calm certainty in his posture, to how present he seemed without trying to be. Ethan wondered when presence had started to feel rare. Later, as rain began to tap against the windows, Lucas muted the television. "I'm heading to bed early," he said. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Same." Neither moved right away. The pause stretched, harmless but noticeable. Lucas smiled once, a small, genuine curve of the mouth, and disappeared down the hallway. Ethan stayed where he was, listening to the rain grow heavier. He finally checked his phone again. A message from Maya appeared, brief and apologetic, explaining a long meeting and a headache. Ethan typed a response he'd written too many times before, understanding, affectionate, careful. He hit send and waited for the familiar hollow feeling to fade. It didn't. As the storm intensified, the apartment seemed to shrink inward, as if drawing breath. The lights flickered once, briefly dimming before returning to normal. Ethan glanced up, unsettled by how sharply his heart reacted. He stood and turned off the television, letting the room fall into a quieter state. The rain was loud now, insistent, filling the space where words might have gone. Ethan told himself he should sleep, that tomorrow would look the same as today, and that sameness was something to be grateful for. Still, as he walked toward his bedroom, he found himself listening for sounds from Lucas's room, any sign of movement, any reminder that he wasn't alone in the apartment. The hallway light buzzed softly overhead, steady for now. Ethan paused at his door, one hand on the frame, and took a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Nothing had happened. Nothing was wrong, yet the air felt charged, as if waiting for a shift he couldn't name. Behind him, thunder rolled, close enough to make the walls tremble. The light flickered again, and for reasons he didn't yet understand, Ethan had the sudden, unsettling sense that whatever came next would not fit neatly into the life he'd been carefully maintaining. The lights died without warning. 1 second the hallway glowed its usual tired yellow, and the next the apartment was swallowed by darkness so complete it felt physical. The television cut off mid-hum, the refrigerator fell silent, and the storm outside surged forward as if invited in. Ethan froze, his senses scrambling to recalibrate. "Power's out," Lucas said from somewhere down the hall. His voice was calm, but closer than Ethan expected. Ethan turned instinctively, misjudging the distance. Thunder cracked overhead, sharp and immediate, and the sound startled him enough that his hand shot out on reflex. His fingers closed around a wrist, warm, solid, unmistakably human. For a brief, suspended moment, neither of them moved. "Ethan," Lucas said quietly, not pulling away. Sorry," Ethan replied, though he didn't let go right away. His heart was pounding hard enough to make his chest ache. The darkness made everything feel closer, more intimate than it had any right to be. When he finally released his grip, his hand felt oddly empty. "It's fine," Lucas said after a beat. "You okay?" "Yeah, just didn't expect it. Storm knocked the whole block out, probably," Lucas said. "I'll grab some candles." Ethan stood there, useless, as Lucas moved past him. He could hear drawers opening, the scrape of a match being struck. A small flame bloomed in the kitchen, throwing uneven shadows across the walls. The light revealed Lucas's face in fragments, eyes thoughtful, expression unreadable. Ethan leaned against the counter, trying to steady himself. He told himself it had been an accident, a natural reaction, yet the memory of that brief contact lingered with unsettling clarity, as if his body had registered something his mind refused to name. Lucas set a candle on the table between them. "These always make things feel more dramatic than they are," he said lightly. Ethan managed a smile. "Yeah, like we're about to tell ghost stories. Or secrets," Lucas replied, then paused, as if reconsidering. He shook his head. "Anyway, we should be fine. Power usually comes back fast." They sat across from each other, the small circle of light holding them in. The storm pressed against the windows, rain streaking down the glass. Without the usual noise of the apartment, every sound felt amplified, the flicker of the candle, the rhythm of breathing, the occasional rumble of thunder. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. For once, the pull of it felt distant, almost irrelevant. He focused instead on Lucas, on the way the candlelight softened his features, on how relaxed he seemed even now. "You don't like storms," Lucas said, not accusing, just observant. Ethan hesitated. "I don't mind them. Just reminds me how little control we actually have." Lucas nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." Silence settled again, heavier this time. Ethan's thoughts spiraled, circling back to Maya, to the life he'd been maintaining through habit and assumption. He felt a twist of guilt that surprised him with its intensity. Nothing had happened, and yet something had shifted. The lights didn't come back. Another crash of thunder made Ethan flinch, and this time he didn't have time to stop himself. His hand brushed Lucas's again, tentative now, seeking reassurance more than safety. Lucas looked at him, really looked at him, and Ethan saw something there he hadn't expected: concern, restraint, understanding. Lucas didn't move his hand away. He didn't pull Ethan closer either. He simply let the contact exist, quiet and unspoken. After a few seconds, Ethan drew back, his breath uneven. "Sorry," he said again, the word carrying more weight than before. "You don't have to apologize," Lucas replied. "Just let me know if you need space." Ethan nodded, grateful and unsettled all at once. He stood abruptly. "I'm going to check the breaker. Just in case." "Okay," Lucas said. "I'll be here." Ethan moved down the hallway, candlelight fading behind him. The breaker box offered no solution, but he lingered there anyway, using the task as an excuse to collect himself. His reflection in the darkened panel looked unfamiliar, eyes too bright, expression caught between fear and recognition. When he returned, Lucas was still at the table, the candle burning low. They exchanged a look that held more than words could manage. The power remained out, the storm unrelenting. Ethan sat back down, aware that the night had already crossed into unfamiliar territory. Whatever line he thought existed between intention and accident no longer felt solid. And as the candle flickered, he understood with quiet certainty that even when the lights returned, things would not simply reset. Morning arrived quietly, as if the night had agreed to leave without explanation. The power was back on, the digital clock blinking and accusing 12 o'clock, but the apartment felt altered in ways electricity couldn't correct. Ethan woke with a dull tension behind his eyes, the memory of candlelight and rain still sharp in his mind. He lay still, listening. No storm now, no thunder, just the ordinary hum of appliances and distant traffic. Normal sounds, reassuring sounds, and yet his body felt braced, as if expecting another sudden darkness. In the kitchen, Lucas stood at the counter, pouring coffee. He looked rested, composed, exactly the way he always did. That familiarity unsettled Ethan more than awkwardness would have. "Morning," Lucas said, glancing over his shoulder. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice steadier than he felt. They moved around each other with careful politeness, sharing the space without touching. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was deliberate. Each of them seemed aware that something unnamed hovered just beneath the surface, asking for attention neither was ready to give. Ethan checked his phone while the coffee brewed. A message from Maya waited for him, sent late the night before. He read it twice, then a third time, searching for reassurance he didn't quite feel. He typed a response and erased it. Typed another, erased that too. Lucas noticed. He didn't comment. They ate breakfast standing up, leaning against opposite counters. It felt temporary, like a ceasefire rather than a routine. When Lucas finally broke the silence, his tone was gentle. "You okay after last night?" Ethan nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Lucas studied him for a moment, then accepted the answer without pressing. "If you want to talk later, I'm around." "Thanks," Ethan said. He meant it. The day passed in fragments. Ethan worked from his bedroom, but concentration came in brief, unreliable bursts. His thoughts kept returning to the night before, not to the storm itself, but to the moments in between. The stillness, the restraint, the way Lucas had neither advanced nor retreated, leaving Ethan alone with his reactions. That evening, the apartment settled back into its usual rhythm. Dinner smells filled the space, music played softly from Lucas's speaker. It all looked the same. That was the problem. After eating, they ended up on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between them measured but noticeable. The television played, but neither paid attention. Ethan felt the weight of unspoken questions pressing against his chest. "Maya's still out of town?" Lucas asked casually. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She'll be back next week." Lucas nodded. "Long distance is hard." The comment wasn't loaded, but it landed heavily. Ethan exhaled. "Harder than I expected." They fell quiet again. The words Ethan had been avoiding gathered at the edge of his mind, insistent. He turned to Lucas, the decision made before he could reconsider. "About last night," Ethan began. Lucas muted the television, giving him his full attention. "Okay, I didn't plan any of that," Ethan said. "And I don't want to make things complicated." "I know," Lucas replied. "And I'm not trying to." That honesty disarmed him. "I have a girlfriend," Ethan said, the statement sounding more like a reminder to himself than a boundary. "I'm aware," Lucas said. "Which is why I haven't crossed any lines." The room felt warmer, the air heavier. Ethan nodded, a sharp pang of guilt tightening in his chest. But something did change. Lucas considered him carefully. "Yeah," he said. "It did." Neither of them smiled. "I don't want to pretend it didn't happen," Ethan continued. "But I also don't want to hurt anyone." Lucas leaned back, thoughtful. Sometimes the hurt starts before anyone does anything obvious. The truth of it struck Ethan with uncomfortable clarity. He had always believed betrayal required action. He was beginning to understand how wrong that was. "I don't expect anything from you," Lucas added. "I just need to be honest about where I stand." "And where's that?" Ethan asked quietly. "I care about you," Lucas said. "But I respect your situation enough not to make choices for you." Ethan looked down at his hands. The room felt suddenly very small. "I don't know what I want yet." "That's okay," Lucas said. "Just don't lie to yourself while you figure it out." The conversation ended there, not with resolution but with clarity. As Lucas stood and headed down the hallway, Ethan remained on the couch, staring at the blank television screen. He understood now that nothing physical needed to happen for a line to be crossed. The realization settled heavily, leaving him with a choice he could no longer postpone. And for the first time since the storm, Ethan wasn't afraid of the dark, only of what he might finally see if he stopped looking away. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He lay awake listening to the ordinary sounds of the apartment, the refrigerator cycling, the distant echo of a car passing outside, trying to convince himself that ordinary still applied. By morning, the answer was clear. It didn't. He brewed coffee and waited for the bitterness to cut through the fog in his head. It didn't. His phone lay face up on the table, silent but heavy with expectation. He knew what conversation needed to happen, and the knowing steadied him in an unexpected way. Lucas emerged from his room as Ethan was pouring a second cup. They exchanged a look that carried no tension this time, only acknowledgement. "Morning," Lucas said. "Morning," Ethan replied. "I'm going to call Maya today." Lucas nodded once. "Okay." There was no encouragement, no warning, just respect. Ethan appreciated that more than reassurance. He waited until the apartment was quiet again before making the call. When Maya answered, her voice was warm, familiar, threaded with relief at finally connecting. Ethan listened, letting her speak, feeling the weight of her presence from a distance. When he finally interrupted, it was with care. "There's something I need to be honest about," he said. Silence followed, attentive and fragile. Ethan spoke slowly, choosing clarity over comfort. He told her about the growing distance, about realizing how much he had been avoiding instead of addressing it. He admitted that his feelings had shifted, that he'd formed an attachment he hadn't meant to, and that pretending otherwise would be unfair to both of them. Maya didn't shout. She didn't accuse. Her disappointment arrived quietly, in questions that asked for understanding rather than absolution. Ethan answered as best he could, resisting the urge to soften the truth. When the call ended, it was with sadness and acceptance, not resolution, but it was real. He sat there for a long moment afterward, breathing through the ache. Ending something that had once mattered left a hollow space, but it also brought a strange relief. The lie was gone. Lucas returned home that evening to find Ethan at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Ethan looked up as Lucas set down his keys. "I told her," Ethan said. Lucas didn't rush forward. He stayed where he was, giving the words room to settle. "How did it go?" "Hard," Ethan said. "Necessary." Lucas nodded. "I'm sorry." "Me too," Ethan replied. And he meant it, for Maya, for himself, for the version of his life he tried to preserve through inertia. They cooked dinner together without ceremony, moving easily in the shared space. It felt different now, not charged, not restrained, but honest. After they ate, they sat at the table, the overhead light steady and bright. "I want to be clear," Ethan said. "I didn't do this because of you." Lucas met his gaze. "I know. I did it because I couldn't keep pretending nothing had changed." "That matters," Lucas said. They talked then, not about what might happen next, but about what had already happened, about fear, about timing, about how easy it was to drift into choices by avoiding them. The conversation was calm, grounded, and unfinished in the best way. Later, as the evening settled, the lights flickered once, briefly. Both of them noticed. "Looks like the storm's finally gone," Lucas said. Ethan smiled faintly. "Feels like it." He stood at the window, watching the city glow steadily beyond the glass. The memory of candlelight returned, not as a moment of temptation, but as a turning point he hadn't recognized at the time. Darkness hadn't caused the truth. It had simply stripped away distraction. Lucas joined him, leaving a respectful distance between them. No hands brushed. No promises were made. The space was intentional, earned. Ethan understood that clarity didn't guarantee ease, only direction. Whatever came next would require patience and honesty he was still learning how to practice. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid of what that honesty might reveal. The power stayed on. The night passed without incident. And as Ethan watched the lights outside remain steady, he knew that the outage hadn't changed who he was, it had only forced him to stop living in half-lit rooms.